and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. The public can attend tonight's meeting in person at the George DeSiero City and County Buildings Council Chambers located at 1 Tacoma Drive, or watch live on Channel 8 through live streaming on Broomfield's website, broomfield.org/live. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name, neighborhood, and the agenda item the caller would like to comment on. If you'd like to speak on more than one agenda item, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 plus participants in the queue have 1.5 minutes to speak. For our hearing impaired residents present, we do have wireless headsets available from our AV team in the back of the council chambers. The City Council regular meeting is called to order. I would like to note that Councilmember Lim is joining us virtually this evening. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson.
Here.
Cohen.
Here.
Hinkle.
Here.
Jazerski.
Here.
Leslie.
Here.
Lim.
Here.
Lindstedt.
Here.
Marsh Holshin.
Here.
Schaff.
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Thank you. A quorum is present. Tonight, we have some special guests here to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in welcoming Broomfield Cub Scout Den 5 from Pack 545. These young men are working to earn their Arrow of Light Award, which is the highest rank in Cub Scouts and prepares a Webelos Cub Scout to become a Boy Scout. Den 5, would you please come forward? And will everyone please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much to our guests for being here tonight and for your interest in your local government. Our future is in great hands with young civic-minded individuals like yourselves. Keep up the good work. In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time, they should limit their comments to 2 minutes. We'll plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We'll begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda, or council may revise the order of business for a meeting. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Are there any objections to this agenda being approved? Seeing none, this agenda is approved. The first item this evening under petitions and communications is a proclamation declaring November 12th through 20th, 2022 as Hunger and Homelessness Awareness and Action Week. Will Kari Hunt and any other staff members here to accept the proclamation, please come and meet Mayor Pro Tem Jazerski at the podium. And would the representatives please introduce themselves?
Manager and council. Apologies, I got that all messed up. Kari Hunt, the Deputy Director for Human Services here in Broomfield.
I'm Lori Lane and I live in Ward 1. And I just want to say thank you so much because this is much needed, as I am one of Broomfield's homeless and I'm not ashamed to say it. So thank you all. I love you guys.
Everyone, Dana Scott. I'm with Broomfield Fish, and our mission is to prevent homelessness and hunger in Broomfield. And we are just very happy that you are declaring this in November. It's needed every month, but we're happy that the proclamation is happening. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Martin Dormish with The Refuge, and I just wanted to say that
in light of the season that we're approaching of Thanksgiving, and that we're all in a place where we're being thankful for the many blessings in our lives, that we would remember those who are less fortunate.
Greetings, I am Brianna and this is my coworker Amber, and we're with Joyful Journeys, and we help with homeless and with the hunger. So we do both at our location.
I see Mr. Casey hanging in the back, but I'm not sure. Are you going to speak, Mr. Casey?
No, I'm not, but good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. I'm Dan Casey, the Director of Human Services.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here tonight. This proclamation recognizes the importance of both increasing awareness of the broad reach of homelessness and hunger and demanding bold action from a broad coalition of community and state partners across government, business, and the nonprofit sector, and our residents too. The City and County of Broomfield partners with many organizations, as you've heard, and initiatives to improve the community's well-being. We do this by connecting residents to available services, implementing public policy initiatives, and encouraging all Coloradans to learn more, speak up, and lend a hand so that Broomfield can be a community where everyone has a safe place to call home and enough food to eat. Every resident is encouraged to speak up in support of our efforts to end homelessness and hunger and take actions to increase affordable housing opportunities and food security with the goal of making homelessness and hunger history within our community, within our state, and within our lifetime. Therefore, as mayor, I hereby declare and proclaim November 12th through 20th, 2022 as Hunger and Homelessness Awareness and Action Week in the City and County of Broomfield. We'll now proceed with public comments. If anyone would like to comment on this item, please step up. I don't see any. Next, are any comments from council? Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for everyone being here tonight. This just shows just how interconnected this issue is. This isn't just a hunger problem. This isn't just an unhoused problem. This is a community issue that a lot of people are affected by. And unfortunately, it's only going to get worse this year. And I think the reality is that everyone has to step forward, not just the few that we have known that have stepped forward. Also, we will be receiving in Colorado an additional 2,000 Ukrainians who are losing not only their homes, but their country. And their families back home. So I just wanted to tell you all that we just appreciate you so much and we see the work that you do. And Broomfield City and County would be nothing without our nonprofits. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else? Okay, well then, thank you all for joining us this evening and for the important work you do for our community. And council and city management will be kicking off a food drive of our own, maybe a little competition to see who can get the most cereal. So stay tuned for more details. We'll move to general public comment next. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on matters other than the items already listed elsewhere on this evening's agenda. Is there anyone who'd like to be heard? Please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Absolutely none. Okay, council's community and event updates are next. Does any member of council have an update this evening? Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. I serve on the Chamber of Commerce Board, and I just wanted to pass along from the board a thank you for council for participating in Hoosball last week. I heard that a council member, Anderson, was really competitive, which isn't such a bad thing, and taking part in the Top Golf tournament this week on Thursday. Membership is strong at about 430 members. We continue to partner with the city throughout our collaborations with Economic Vitality and the Broomfield Workforce Center, including twice monthly meetings and weekly business walks. And last but definitely not least, this ribbon cutting on Friday for Magnolia Road for our first legalized marijuana store will be on Friday at 3 p.m. and you're all invited. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So this last week, Mayor Castriot and I attended the teen council meeting. We discussed many items that are happening within the high schools, and it was a great meeting. I was glad to be a part of that. Also, this last week, I got the opportunity to go on a bus trip with CDOT, and we viewed the I-25 corridor from Denver to Wyoming. Well, actually, we stopped in Fort Collins at Prospect Street, but after this has kind of been many years in the making. So they completed an environmental impact study in about 2011 that addressed all types of modes of transportation within that corridor. And that corridor is a major corridor for Broomfield, or for Broomfield too, but for the state of Colorado, as well as the nation in terms of getting freight north and south. So the multimodal transportation network was at about a cost of $2.8 billion in 2009 or $4.6 billion in 2020 dollars. So with limited funding, this project would take till about 2075 to complete. So CDOT is looking at a comprehensive strategy to reduce the implementation costs and shorten that time frame. This phrased implementation approach would first construct the express lanes from Denver to Fort Collins, and then constructing that third purpose lane as funding becomes available. Some of you have probably seen that express lane, especially most closely to Denver, and have seen that third purpose lane from Denver up to quite a ways. So the big thing is that from about 144th to Meade, the express lanes aren't funded. And why this is important is our multimodal hub, which is at Colorado 7. And that is a very important intersection of I-25 and Colorado 7 for us. That is not included in the 10-year CDOT plan for funding. And why those express lanes are important is because it provides not only choice for the drivers, but it also provides the safer transit for people going up and down I-25, as well as for the transit to be able to get off and in to traffic smoothly. And it also reduces the transit ride time. So we'll continue to talk more about this, and next opportunity will be at the Colorado 7 Coalition meeting coming up this Friday. May 20 or October 28th. So thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much, council member. Any other council member updates or plugs or events? I had a crazy busy week last week. On Wednesday, I had my first State Board of Health meeting with the Air Quality Control Commission. And it was an all-day affair with us meeting as the Board of Health, mainly to do some housekeeping of some statutory things that were passed by the legislature. But with the Air Quality Control Commission, they gave us their summer ozone report. And it wasn't a good one. It is definitely not getting better. And they're trying to get us in compliance, but the Front Range of Colorado is in severe ozone non-attainment status. So it's something we're going to be talking about a lot in the next few months on how to get back into compliance, because the air quality is no longer safe outside if you have respiratory issues. So for someone with asthma or COPD, it is now more dangerous for you to exercise outside than inside. Let that sink in. That's how bad it is. We toured an air quality monitoring site called La Casa, where I saw the Moose mobile vehicle that has been deployed to Broomfield in the past, and was very familiar with a lot of the things that they're doing, because we have such a state-of-the-art air quality monitoring program here in Broomfield already. And I urged them to try and work toward ozone action alerts being mandatory instead of voluntary. Because right now they ask people to power down or don't do high emitting industries, but it's not required. And I think at this point, we may need to revisit the voluntary nature of those ozone action alerts, because I don't think they're being taken seriously. So I pushed for that, and also air quality health standards, because the health guidelines that we currently operate under aren't enforceable. And we need something that's going to create a standard that truly protects the environmental health of our community. And we don't have that yet. So I'm glad I'm there and look forward to more updates on that realm. I also attended a mayor's summit with the Colorado Municipal League. So it was mayors from all over the state. And it was really wonderful to kind of have that support, find out their perspectives on everything from housing to water, sustainability. We're all tackling the same issues. It's not like we live on an island. So I really got a lot out of that. And my biggest takeaway is that we do so many things great here. I don't have a lot of the issues that they do. And a lot of it is because our council and our city management team is in alignment and we work together on solving the problems facing Broomfield. So I left feeling more grateful than ever. And it is truly just a privilege to serve the people of Broomfield. Council's consideration of the consent agenda is next. We'll review this evening's consent agenda in two parts. Item 7B is the review of the revised 2022 budgets and proposed 2023 budgets for the city, the borough, which is the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority, and the Arista Local Improvement Board of Directors. Following the clerk's reading of consent agenda items 7A through 7C, 7A and 7C through 7E, we will ask for public comments. Will the clerk please read agenda items 7A and 7C through 7E by title?
7A, approval of minutes from October 11th, 2022, regular meeting, and October 11th, 2022, special meeting. 7C, resolution number 2022-135, authorizing and approving the relocation of community ditch within Richard Steele Park and authorizing the acceptance of quitclaim deed and granting of an easement in relation thereto. 7D, resolution number 2022-136, appointing Broomfield City and County Manager and the Deputy City and County Manager as the first and second alternates to the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council. 7E, resolution number 2022-92, authorizing and approving an agreement by-in between the City of County of Broomfield and Goodland Construction Incorporated for the West 136th Avenue and Aspen Street Traffic Signal Project.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with in-person public comment. If there's anyone who would like to be heard on these agenda items, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. Next would be on the phone, but there is no one on the phone either. So y'all are a quiet bunch. Does any member of council have questions on these agenda items? Oh, Councilmember Lim.
Thank you. On item 7E, there's many residents who travel 136 and Aspen Street who be glad to see that the light there will be completed by, according to the contract, 7/21/23. Could the staff please explain alternate 1 and alternate 2 and provide some estimate of when those may or may not go forward and what the process would be in deciding if those move forward?
Good evening, and Katie Allen is coming down to the podium.
Good evening, Katie Allen, City and County Engineer. Excuse me. Yes, Councilmember Lim, alternative 1 was to redo an ADA ramp at the northeast corner. It doesn't have to be redone, it's in compliance. We hope to still do it with the project, but because our budget is tight, we're going to wait till the end to see if it can be accomplished with our contingency. Alternative 2 is a fiber optic line connecting the traffic signals. This was requested by IT to do concurrently, but it was outside of our budget. And so IT will do it separately. So I don't have a schedule for that, unless Kateri is here for that. But the traffic signals will be synchronized with radio communication.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Lim?
I think so. Do you expect the ramp to go forward in 2023, or would you anticipate that that will be constructed later into future years' budgets?
We hope to do it in 2023 with this project. Otherwise, we'll work with Public Works in the concrete replacement program or another project to get it done.
Okay, thank you.
I'm looking that way because that's where she was on my screen.
It's okay. Thank you very much. Any other council member questions, comments? All right, we'll now proceed with council's approval of consent agenda items 7A and 7C through 7E. Is there a motion to approve these items? Councilmember Leslie.
I move the motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Oh, okay. Then next is, will the clerk please call the roll? As mentioned earlier, Councilmember Lim is joining us remotely, so we're going to be doing roll call votes this evening.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle, Jazirski, Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Winstead,
Yes.
Marsh Holshin,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. The public comments for these items will be combined. Before considering this item, I'll ask the clerk to convene each board. Convene the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority, please. Do I do that?
Sorry.
This is so odd.
If you can go a little up on your script, the meeting of the borough is called to order. If you can call the meeting to order.
Oh. This is a really tricky consent agenda, y'all. We did public comments discussion. We called the roll. Then it says, next is council's consideration of the second part of the consent agenda, which includes items 7B, 15A, and 16A, the budget resolutions for the city, the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority, and the Arista Local Improvement District. The public comments for these items will be combined. Before considering this items, I will ask the clerk to convene each board. So I just convened the board, though, right? Yeah. Okay. The meeting of the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority is called to order. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll for the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority.
Anderson,
Here.
Cohen,
Here.
Hinkle,
Here.
Jazirski,
Here.
Leslie,
Here.
Lim,
Here.
Linstead,
Here.
Marsh Holshin,
Here.
Mitchell, Nielsen, Schaff,
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Thank you. A quorum is present. Next, the meeting of the Arista Local Improvement District Board of Directors is called to order. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll for the Arista Local Improvement District Board of Directors.
Anderson,
Here.
Cohen,
Here.
Hinkle,
Here.
Jazirski,
Here.
Leslie,
Here.
Lim,
Here.
Linstead,
Here.
Marsh Holshin,
Here.
Schaff,
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Thank you. A quorum is present. Will the clerk please read agenda items 7B, 15A, and 16A by title? We wear a lot of hats.
7B, resolution number 2022-112, adopting the third amendment to the city and county of Broomfield budget for the year 2022. Resolution number 2022-131-ALID, adopting a first amendment to the Arista Local Improvement District budget for the year 2022. Resolution number 2022-113-UR, adopting the first amendment to the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority budget for the year 2022. Resolution number 2022-114, adopting the budget for the city and county of Broomfield for the fiscal year 2023 and appropriating sums of money. Resolution number 2022-115-UR, adopting the budget for the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority for the fiscal year 2023 and appropriating sums of money. Resolution number 2022-116-ALID, adopting the budget for the Arista Local Improvement District for the fiscal year 2023 and appropriating sums of the money. Item will be reviewed concurrently with items 15A and 16A. 15A, resolution number 2022-113-UR, adopting the First Amendment to the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority budget for the year 2022. Resolution number 2022-115-UR, adopting the budget for the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority for the fiscal year 2023 and appropriating sums of money. Item will be reviewed concurrently with items 7B and 16A. Arista Local Improvement District Board of Directors, 16A, resolution number 2022-131-A LID, adopting a First Amendment to the Arista Local Improvement District budget for the year 2022. Resolution number 2022-116-ALID, adopting the budget for the Arista Local Improvement District for the fiscal year 2023 and appropriating sums of the money. Item will be reviewed concurrently with items 7B and 15A.
Thank you. Next is in-person public comment. If there's anyone who'd like to be heard, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. Public comment on the phone is next. I don't see anyone there either. Does any member of the council or the authority or the directors have comments on these agenda items? Seeing none. Due to the need for council, the Urban Renewal Authority and the Arista Local Improvement District to each have separate votes on their respective budget resolutions, I'll ask the clerk to call for 3 different votes. We'll start with the city's budget resolutions. Is there a motion from council that proposed resolutions 2022-112 and 2022-114 be approved? Councilmember Ward.
I move that resolutions number 2022-112 and 2022-114 be adopted.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Marshall.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right. Will the clerk please call the roll for council?
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jezerski,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Linstead,
Yes.
Marsh Holston,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Next will be the Urban Renewal Authority's budget resolutions. Is there a motion from the authority that proposed resolutions 2022-113-UR and 2022-115-UR be approved? Councilmember Henkel.
It was like you were looking at me. I hope I get this right. I move that resolution number 2022-113-UR and resolution number 2022-115-UR be adopted.
Yes, thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward.
I second the motion.
Thanks. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll for the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority?
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jezerski,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Linstead,
Yes.
Marsh Holston,
Yes.
Mitchell, Nielsen, Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously too. Finally, we'll consider the Arista Local Improvement District budget resolutions. Is there a motion from the board that proposed resolutions 2022-131-ALID and 2022-116-ALID be approved? So moved is an acceptable answer. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you. So moved.
Is there a second? Councilmember Schaaf.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Or will the clerk please call the roll for the Arista Local Improvement District Board?
Jezerski,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Linstead,
Yes.
Marsh Holston,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. That concludes the business items before both the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority and the Arista Local Improvement District, and therefore those meetings are adjourned. There is no business before the Board of Social Services or the Board of Health this evening. The first item under council business this evening is a public hearing and council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-134, approving the Lambertson Farms filing number 4, Lot 3, Planned Unit Development Plan, Amendment, and Site Development Plan. I'll now declare the public hearing open. We'll follow the city's standard public hearing procedures. First, staff will present a summary of the proposal. Next, we'll have the applicant's presentation. Then we'll ask for public comments and final comments from the applicant. Finally, questions from city council members. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council and community. Anna Burtonzetti, Co-Director of Community Development, will walk us through this item. Ms. Burtonzetti.
Thank you and good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. If I could have the next slide, please. The subject proposal is for a site development plan as well as a PUD plan amendment to allow an auto repair facility on a piece of property that's just under an acre in size in the Lambertson Farms area. The proposal is located on the west side of Huron Street. This area of Lambertson Farms currently does not allow the automotive service use. And so that is why a PUD plan amendment is requested. The list of uses would be amended with that PUD plan just to add auto repair services for this one subject parcel within Lambertson Farms. Next slide, please. The Broomfield Comprehensive Plan designation for this property is commercial, and this proposed use is consistent with the Comprehensive Plan land use designation. Next slide, please. The building will be located centrally on this site. It's about 4,556 square feet. Parking will be located to the east and the west side of the building, and pedestrian connections have been provided. Landscaping enhancements have been included, and the applicant has included electric vehicle charging infrastructure as required, as well as bicycle parking spaces. A variance has been requested for the subject property to allow for the reduction in the required number of parking spaces for this site. Based on the requirements established in the Broomfield Municipal Code, the subject property would be required to have 31 parking spaces, and the applicant is requesting a reduction to 26 spaces. The applicant has indicated that servicing of vehicles will take place internal to the building, and customers generally are only parked at the site for brief periods of time during the pickup and drop off. The provided parking is consistent with other service street locations. Next slide, please. The subject proposal includes neutral color scheme consistent with some of the other buildings in Lambertson Farms. The building utilizes stucco as the primary building material, but does have a stone base and accents, as there's some vertical articulation around the main building entrance. The east and west elevations feature the roll-up doors. Signage will be reviewed with the sign permit is expected to comply with the municipal code. Next slide, please. An online concept review for the subject proposal was held in late June and July of this year, and the provided plans are consistent with the conceptual proposal. The applicant has made some minor updates, including adding a screen wall to the northern property line and enhancing the pedestrian infrastructure. A neighborhood meeting was held in February of this year. No residents attended this meeting. The Land Use Review Commission provided a unanimous recommendation of approval on September 26th of this year, and public hearing requirements have been met for this proposal. Staff has identified the requested PUD amendment as a key issue for the proposal, since this use is not currently within the list of permitted uses for this area of Lambertson Farms. The text amendment, as I mentioned, will allow automotive service uses to be permitted on this parcel, and the City Council will need to consider whether the proposed use is compatible with nearby uses and appropriate to be added to this parcel within Lambertson Farms. And this concludes staff's presentation.
Next is the applicant's presentation. Just as we ask our staff to keep their presentations brief, I ask the applicant to be concise. Will the applicant's representative please come to the podium and identify yourself for the record before beginning your presentation?
Good evening. My name is Dane Vero. I'm with Gray Wolf Architecture. We're the local architect representing the owners. I'm in CRE. Thank you for the the presentation pretty much ran through everything I had to say. Gray Wolf Architecture has done several service street projects throughout the Front Range. And this one represents that continued brand identity throughout the Front Range. And we have had other facilities that we've done traffic studies, acoustical studies, parking studies, and have not had any trouble with any of them. As was mentioned, all of the service, I'm sure many of your constituents are familiar with the type of work that's done at these facilities. It's all indoors. Basic maintenance, there's no heavy engine replacement work or anything like that. It's just general maintenance for people who drive their vehicles every day. The parking issue, as was noted, is consistent with the other facilities, and there have been no issues at the other facilities as far as having a shortage of parking. Guess that's pretty much all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much. Next will be in-person public comment. If anyone would like to be heard on this item, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. And I'm not seeing any online either. So questions from council are next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments for or against this item is later. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Lim.
Thank you. When I submitted concept review comments about 8 months ago, I cited there was a letter from the president of Hope Montessori Academy, and they asked for additional landscaping to be provided on the north boundary line and some kind of extra buffer. I'm assuming that the screen wall fulfills their requirements that they were indicating, but I just wanted to know if staff or the applicant had reached out specifically to the president of the academy to see if the screen wall was acceptable to them.
Yes, the screen wall fulfills that intent. 6 foot tall concrete CMU wall with material to match the building, which will obviously provide a visual and acoustical barrier. I personally can't speak to whether ownership reached out to the Montessori school to confirm that. I know there was some discussion about whether that wall would be shading the playground, and we did a 3-dimensional model and a solar study to confirm that, in fact, the Montessori school has their own fence around their playground, which is actually back from the wall. So the shadow cast from the wall on the lowest sun angle in the winter only infringes on the playground by a few feet. And in fact, the landscaping that they already have in place, the columnar evergreen trees along that side actually shade the playground more. So that's as much as I can respond.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Councilmember Lim?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So I was curious that we didn't get a whole lot of comments on the online concept review, and we don't have any here tonight. I just had a question with the Land Use Review Commission. Did we have any public comment at that approval? And that was approved with a vote of 5-0 with no conditions.
That's correct. Councilmember Schaaf, I was just looking at Shelby to make sure, but we don't recall any comments that were received at that meeting either.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's it. All right, Councilmember Marshall Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick question. With this type of facility this is going to be, what is the noise level going to be coming from the maintenance of the vehicles? And is it going to be conducted with the doors shut, or is it going to be with the doors open?
Yeah, so most of the maintenance is done with the doors closed. And the type of noise, there's not noisy procedures. The noisiest thing might be a pneumatic wrench, putting the tires on and off. But general, most of the time the doors will be closed. But also I'd like to note that the doors on the building are oriented perpendicular to the school. So the sound will be going different direction.
And it looks like the property directly to the west that's unoccupied is zone commercial. Is that correct? So it's not gonna be like houses or anything like that?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember. Yes, that is a commercial property. In the past, it had been approved for office and retail type uses. We expect it to come back through for a future site plan prior to development.
Okay, that's all, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-134. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution number 2022-134 by title?
Hmm. 11A, public hearing resolution number 2022-134, approving the Lambertson Farms filing number 4, lot 3, Service Street Automotive, planned unit development plan amendment and site development plan.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Ward.
I move that resolution number 2022-134 be approved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Leslie.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Any discussion? Will the clerk, seeing no further discussion, will move forward to the vote on this resolution number 2022-134. That's new. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Linstead,
Yes.
Marshall Olson,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jazersky,
That passes unanimously. Thank you and welcome to Broomfield. I lost my place. Give me a second, y'all. I was trying to add something into the script and then it went back up to some place that, okay. We did that. Okay, so now we're on B. Next item under council business this evening is the public hearing and council's consideration on second and final reading of ordinances 2176, 2177, and 2203, amending the Broomfield Code related to monthly water, sewer, and reclaimed wastewater charges and fees. I'll now declare the public hearing open. We'll follow the city standard public hearing procedures for code changes. First, staff will present a summary of the ordinances. Next, we'll ask for public comments. Finally, questions from city council members. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. And Brenda Ritchie, our CFO. Long time coming on this utility rate ordinance. We appreciate council's patience, the questions. We appreciate the community's questions and the dialogue and deliberation that we have seen and the opportunity to answer those additional questions. Ms. Ritchie is going to do a very brief presentation, what those conversations have been, but she's also going to include at the end some of the questions that council has presented to us. Ken Rutt, our director, our newly minted director of Public Works, will do a very brief walkthrough of what conservation means. Again, those are all in response to council questions and community questions. Ms. Ritchie.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman. Good evening, Brenda Ritchie, Chief Financial Officer. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council. Before you this evening, as Ms. Hoffman indicated, is a consideration and adoption of the 3 ordinances that would adjust the rates associated with the monthly service charges and license fees for the water, sewer, and water reclamation. And it's been a series of conversations that actually started back in 2020 and really took shape in this last year as we completed our utility rate study update. Next slide, Kyle, please. So what led us to today really is what we heard from in part of those conversations and what really augmented last week's conversation with staff regarding the operating costs such as chemicals and electricity, which are all essential in the process of providing safe drinking water and treating the wastewater continue to increase. In addition to those increases, is in our contractual costs related to acquiring those shares of water and securing those water shares. Construction costs have also greatly increased over the last year, specifically in the last several months, we've seen that, and we anticipate that to continue within the next year related to water, wastewater facility improvement projects, which are focused on the aging infrastructure, making sure that we are not, as the mayor pointed out last week, deferring those costs, that we are taking care of what we have. So those replacements, construction, rehabilitation is really critical in the treatment and storage in those facilities, along with our sewer assessments and rehabilitation. All of those aspects really and elements necessitated staff to work alongside our consultant Will Dan, who's here this evening tonight, to review our financial plan, really determine if the rate structure that we have had in place was sufficient to really fund the daily operations, maintenance, and planned capital expenditures. It was evidence through their analysis and through staff's work that we really need to do some adjustments to our rate structure and design in order to continue providing the services at the appropriate levels without an undue burden, not just to Broomfield's financial security, but really in terms of allowing the flexibility and agile component for development in the future as we have a growing population as well. So really to meet all of those needs is what led us to today. Next slide, please. So this is a familiar slide, but wanted to focus on why it's really important to remind the community of what this rate study's intent was. The city and county of Broomfield manages and operates water, wastewater, and water reclamation, and projecting a need for those utility rate adjustments to fund the rising ongoing costs and maintenance associated with the debt service levels with those capital improvements of the system. The first step was to really understand the costs associated with each utility and then determine if it was adequately funded through the revenue that was being charged in the form of the fees and services. And the byproduct of that is really the rates. It's not the driver. It's really the byproduct of those revenue adjustments, which is what the customers see on their end. Next slide, please. So this has been quite the topic of the residential impact in terms of the proposed water and sewer services for residential customers, and which is found on this slide. The biggest adjustment that we see here is really related to our water services. We moved from a flat rate structure, and we're proposing to move to a tiered rate structure. There was a lot of conversation around conservation, and would like to clarify that the intent of this initial venture is not to solve conservation. It is really a tool coupled with education outreach to really help complement the conservation efforts that Broomfield currently has and plans to enhance in the coming future, which our Public Works Director, Mr. Ken Rutt, will kind of further explain on, but it's really a tool to help support that effort. Moving from that flat rate to that tiered rate allows us, as we on an annual basis come back, have that conversation through our budget process with council to identify, do the analysis, are the rates that are currently being charged and the revenue that is currently being generated enough to support the expenditures that we're seeing. So again, we have that agile flexibility by tying it not to a specific rate, but rather what is the revenue needed to support those expenditures. And the other component that came along with that, there's been some questions in the community of looking at our rate structure, the rates have lowered, and comparatively to areas such as the West in California, Flagstaff, Arizona was raised as another comparison. The bottom line is the analysis that was done and conducted was specifically related to Broomfield. what are Broomfield's needs in order to operate. Therefore, these rates are being proposed on that structure. We also, Kevin Burnett, who's here this evening from Wilden, actually worked on the Flagstaff rate structure. So if afterwards council has questions, he can directly, specifically address that, that aspect of why their rates are much higher. But it's always a cautionary tale when comparing our community to other communities, even if it's neighboring communities, because we don't know what went into their assessment, what aspects related to their investment infrastructure was done, how they're proposing to maintain it. So it's really important that we're focusing on Broomfield's needs in order to really focus our cost efforts and cost recovery efforts to be associated with that. So staff really appreciates the opportunity to kind of help clarify that in the pricing and recognize that that outside perspective appears that we're reducing the rate, but it's really important to say it's not just from an environmental component that we're talking about conservation, it's from a fiscal perspective as well. So by artificially or making any adjustments to the rates here this evening would actually have us go back and we would have to reanalyze the data to make sure that any adjustment that's being made would meet the demands and the needs of the revenue coming in. So for example, if we were to increase the rates on the higher end for those higher users to drive conservation, what it would do is actually impact those lower tiered rates. And those lower tier rates are customers that use it for your basic services, drinking water, cooking, bathing, cleaning. That's where we looked at our customer base, really analyzed the data and determined why it's 3 tiers. And so by increasing on one end, at some point we have to increase the rates if we're going to, or if we, even if we reduce it, somewhere has to give. So just wanted to kind of note that it does impact all customers across the board. So our first attempt was to make it equitable from the component of allowing for individuals that use it for that basic need to be able to have a fair pricing structure. Next slide, please. So then from a non-residential perspective, the water reclamation or reuse utility did not require an actual revenue increase. That's why you see a decrease. But what it did do, we actually shifted the methodology related to the calculation. So previously, the reuse calculations were based on just 50% of the water rate. It's not industry standard practice. Therefore, we went with what the American Water Works Association recommends. And based on what, again, that specific utility requires to fund its operations was determined, and it actually resulted in a lower usage charge, but the basic fee did increase, and that's to maintain your administrative operations aspects. Next slide, please. And the last aspect related to fees being considered this evening are in relation to the license fees. Now, these are one-time payments which reflect the demands and costs created by residential and commercial development for utility capacity. They also fund outstanding debt service and applicable infrastructure related to that new development, and as well as making the overall system more robust. Therefore, there must be a rational nexus between the two, which is why Broomfield is proposing, based on our analysis, that the rates, again, we did not go to the maximum legally defensible allowable amount. That was for water license, for example, that was roughly 46,000. We determined that by increasing it to 35,000 based on the upcoming, capital projects that we have would be able to fund it. So that's kind of how the proposed fees were laid out. It's really to help support that infrastructure. Next slide, please. And so that last slide is really to just highlight here are the current programs that we have or that we're working on to really enhance to help with the conservation efforts. One of the things that we talked about and recognized during this process was that our utility bills did not really give robust information for customers to really know how do they compare or from last month to this month or even last year. So we've been working to kind of develop a prototype that we've worked with our billing company to kind of mock that up. So we're expecting to roll that out by the new year, regardless of what happens. Our intent is to ensure that folks have an easier time to understand their bills. The other component is the conservation education outreach, which we currently do through CSU Extension, and we have other resources available through Central Resources. So things like Garden in a Box and turf replacement. Those elements, the water audits, are all components currently available. It's on a limited basis, on a first come, first served basis, but it is something that Broomfield currently offers, along with rebate programs in conjunction with maybe replacing low flow shower heads or toilets and things of that nature. So I'll turn it back over to City Manager Hoffman to kind of kick off the rest regarding conservation.
Thank you, Brenda. I appreciate that. And where is Mr. Rutt? Oh, right there. Perfect. Thank you, sir. Some of the conversations that we have been having with regards to what's next for water. Can you walk us through that a little bit so that council can and the community understand what we've been working on and when it's going to come to fruition and what it includes, please?
Sure. Good evening, Council, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and City Manager Hoffman. Pleasure to be here with you again tonight and an opportunity to speak about one of my favorite topics that I spent my career in. So we have several really exciting initiatives that we're looking at. And in addition to the conservation programs that Ms. Ritchie went over, we're looking at one of the major initiatives that we started in August is what we're calling the Smart Water Growth Workshops. And what does that all imply? So we're working in conjunction with several of our internal departments, such as planning, engineering, parks, legal, public works. We're all working together to come up and update our comprehensive plan to improve our water planning and resources. These things are outlined for these things is to improve our baseline water demands, how we adequately review and develop and participate in those, require developers to implement water efficiency measures, update development codes to be more water wise with specific focuses on outdoor water efficiencies, to include zero-scape requirements, turf limitations, soil amendments, rain, weather, and soil moisture sensors, efficient outdoor fixtures, acceptable native and drought-resistant plant lists, proper maintenance and irrigation schedules, landscape plans, as-built requirements, and landscaper certifications. And we're going through these developments, and part of that is updating our codes, our municipal code, that would be more focused on water conservation and more efficient use of our water supplies. And as we probably read earlier this week, last week, Northern Water came out with their initial quota in November. And that quota typically is a 50% at this point in time of year. They reduced that this year to a 40% quota. So a 20% reduction. And the next adjustment will not take place until April. And in April, we'll be able to plan and react and adjust to whatever the quota will be over the summer. So I think it's critical to know that the board also emphasized that for all of the participants in the Northern Water system, that business as usual will be difficult in light of the things in the Colorado River. And so staff has taken a very proactive approach to not only the initiative with the Smart Watering Workshop, but also how do we approach water conservation. And so all of these factors play into our current planning and development of moving Broomfield forward. And Broomfield's always been proactive throughout the years in making sure we had enough water supply to meet our demands. And this is just another step in how we react as a staff in our planning objectives.
Mr. Rutt, would you be kind enough to let us know when council and the community can see the fruition of the work? This is it's a huge lift. There's probably 16 to 22 people that are working on this team in order to bring what the understanding and also the recommendations by when in 2023.
It is our goal right now to come to council in a study session in September of 23 and provide that our recommendations. for your considerations. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention too, that we're also working on, that Colorado Water Quality Commission passed last week, was a direct potable reuse. And one of the things we're doing currently is the wastewater facility is in the midst of a master plan update for the next 20 years. And part of that master plan update, we're looking at direct potable reuse. And what's the impacts to Broomfield? What do we need to look at from a treatment standard perspective? You know, how do we reuse that water? And the impact of direct potable reuse can be significant in the fact that a lot of our water supply we can reuse, as we talked about last week at the study session, is we can continue to reuse that. So how do we do that effectively? How do we do that safely? And how do we do that cost effectively? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rutt and Ms. Ritchie. Next will be public comments. So if anyone would like to comment on this item, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Chris Rorty. I live at 4297 Portobello Drive. I'm president of the Anthem Ranch Board of Directors. As you know, Anthem Ranch is a large property, 350 acres. It requires a lot of reused water to maintain it. On September 29th, we were stunned when we received a letter indicating 3 of our reused accounts, we were using excessive amounts of reused water. On October 4th, when we were shocked when we finally received the actual allocations for all 27 accounts. Why were we stunned? We never knew there were any allocations. At the September 13th council meeting, we were told that the allocations were on our bill. So the next day, we pulled up the bill, no allocations. Then we were told that on the yearly report to the state on reused water, allocations were on there. No allocations, just the usage numbers. In 2018, we had a water audit done with the city, and there was no mention of allocations nor overusage. The 2021 inspection from the city and county of Broomfield on the reclaimed wastewater simply tells us we need to paint our controller boxes, valve boxes, and sprinkler heads purple. So before September 29th, we have had no record of any notification of our overuse or our allocations. So I really am requesting tonight that if there were other communications, that we do get a copy of them. So we were really shocked at the impact of charging our HOA $15.10 for any overuse instead of $1.51. It's devastating to our budget, which is only $3.5 million. One would think that we would have copies of the contracts or license agreements signed by our initial developer in the city, but the final developer has no such records, and neither does the HOA. Had we been made aware of this issue when we were still involved with the developer, we would have demanded they pay for additional tap equivalents that they so grossly underestimated. In one account alone, they purchased 1.36 tap equivalents, and now we're being told we need to purchase 30 more at a cost of close to $400,000, and that's just one account. Tonight, I was supposed to be at the Buell Theater watching the Temptations and Ain't Too Proud to Beg, but instead I'm here and I ain't too proud to beg for the following. Number one, while the staff has extended the grace period from 3 to 15 months, we need you to allow us a much longer grace period to put in place water conservation measures, which take time to implement and see reductions. Allow us to collaborate with you and set a reasonable yearly goals with no surcharges being levied unless we miss our goal. I understand that Bruce and Lori have submitted a Section 18 to put this on the council's agenda. Number two, allow us to combine all of our accounts since the underusing accounts amount to 18 million gallons. Combining all accounts would make our goal for savings realistic over a period of time. If it's impossible to extend our grace period or combine our accounts, we will need to notify our residents of this impending financial risk of potentially having to come up with a couple $1 million in 15 months to purchase sufficient tap equivalents to match our usage. So please work with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Judy Kelly from Anthem Ranch also. And I'd like you to understand that water usage and reduction is an extreme important thing to us. And it's been a part of our strategic plan since 2019 that we've been working toward this, okay? So we did purchase some smart controllers, and in the first year, they saved 13 million gallons. Okay, we just also have been just bought 5 more and just had them installed. So this is something that we've been working on, okay? And then we've also have other things that we've been doing with it. So we purchased 23 gauges for smart controllers so that we can have a real information on usage and not just wait for a bill. It's something that's going to be current. And also, how can we possibly like eliminate irrigating some of the native grasses as much as we do, even though I know for fire mitigation, that's an issue. Okay, but then how do we cut back on that? And then also just, we have 5,000 acres of open space, okay, in Anthem Ranch, and some of it is turf. Okay, and so now we're looking into how can we possibly cut back on turf or cut back on the irrigation. Maybe we don't start as early, maybe we end earlier. Okay, so we're thinking about how to do that. And then what kind of ideas could we get for turf conversion? And so we've contacted a turf specialist to see if we could get information about that. And then also lining up our accounts for the irrigation map, okay, and investigating how they appear grossly overused. So we're working on that too. And all of these strategies, once I've said, you know, we've been working toward this for years and we're still moving forward. We have a sustainability committee, and that committee has been working on zero waste, but now also on water. And so next year, our goal is to how do we, not talking about the HOA now, what I want to do is the HOA wants to help residents to be educated about how do they save water at home. And then also we'd like to be collaborative with you and how to save water and cut back. Okay, I mean, this is a priority we've had and we really believe in it. We're not trying to argue against it by any means. Please understand that about us, okay? So we do want to work together with you. We'd rather work together than be penalized. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kelly. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on this item? Online? See anyone else? All right. Questions from council are next, and members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to make amendments is later. Councilmember Leslie.
Good, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Mr. Wright, what you mentioned you would come back in next September. So we're talking about a year from now. Is there any way that that process can be expedited, given what you just heard? And we're not the only HOA that's, you know, struggling with this, but we'd love to get as quickly as possible more access to the resources that you're talking about. And I'll just also say for my council colleagues, Jennifer, City Manager Hoffman, and Councilmember Anderson, these are complex titles, and are working together. And I've submitted a couple of Section 18s to try to get this conversation going further. And I really appreciate the leadership of the HOA's attitude towards wanting to do this. But part of the thing is, from our vantage point, we can't do an audit until next July 23, but we need to be doing things now. As you've heard, we already are doing. I was really impressed last week with the presentation you all made on what Broomfield is doing in the water area. And it was so good to hear your efforts as well, you and your colleagues. But we need to expedite this. We need to move it up. So I'm just asking, is there some way that maybe not the whole thing wait until next September? Maybe you can begin earlier in the year to bring things to council so we can start to get a better handle on what the possibilities are, particularly those areas where there could be some incentives for both HOAs and individual residents to be able to do this. No one's fighting this. It's a matter of how we do this most efficiently, again, with enough time so that we can get these strategies in place so they actually work before we start getting penalized. I certainly don't have any problem with the rates being proposed tonight. We do have an issue, and I want to congratulate City Manager. I know these issues have been on the books for years. The trigger hasn't been pulled until now. By pulling the trigger, it's generating these very important conversations. So I see that as a good thing. At the same time, I want to make sure that, you know, our residents aren't penalized because we just don't have enough resources or time to get this thing done in the right way. So I just would appreciate any thoughts you have about expediting the work that you're doing.
I'm gonna start that.
Sure.
Councilmember Leslie. So a couple of things. One, Ms. Kelly, it's always good to see you. And the proactive approach, we were all impressed in 2020 in the midst of COVID when you started doing your water watch. And we all thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So I want to own a couple of things. One, our finance system as includes the utility billing is 25 plus years old. As we move through the budget and moving from a manual system into not even a 21st century system, but a system that doesn't require an 8-hour manual pull. It's no wonder communities and staffs don't request water increases and rate increases from their council. Super unpopular. And it really does make us look at the underbelly of what those conversations have been, and then doing the due diligence to figure out what those appropriate rate studies should be. During that due diligence, we found, and again, this is all manual, back to Director Ritchie's point of what's on those water bills. It's also reflected in the HOA's comment about what's on the water bills and what isn't. As we know, in Broomfield, we have over 45 HOAs. When we're pulling all of the data, we have a list of entities, including 2 HOAs, that had excessive use. In our charter, we've always been able to charge 10 times. Once you go over your agreed upon allotment, we can charge 10 times. And again, part of that was, it's not punitive. Part of it is conservation, and it's also kind of the personal accountability for paying attention. When developers transfer over to the HOAs, I know that the HOA, we met with the new manager of the HOA. When you have residents that sit on the HOA board and they do that transition, that is a huge amount of responsibility for a resident HOA to assume. So you have a whole host of things that is going to influence and impact a community and residents for about 2 decades. One of those caveats is the water. So when we all sat down and we discovered these exceedances, rather than having that pendulum swing, it was really understanding from, and we're still working on the ability to use existing TEs for those that aren't. So I understand that it's frustrating and it's lengthy, and we're still in the process of trying to figure out what all of that, how all of that shakes out. The other piece is we have to be sure that we have the structure in place on the back end to now do what we should have been doing, which is not from a notification piece, because again, with these HOAs and these developers saying this amount of water, it's really the HOA's responsibility. From an ownership perspective, we have to be able to have our system that accounts for, delivers on, and provides the heads up of you're coming close to whatever those original agreed upon TEs are. We don't have that. We're working on getting that. So that's part of the ownership piece, right? When we know better, we do better. Didn't know now. So then the influence on what happens next. We have 10, again, 2 HOAs and the rest exceedances. Good faith effort as we move through 2023. So we don't bill until the end of the year. So the bills for 2023 will not go out until December of 2023. The bills for 2024 won't go out until the end of 2024. So when we look at what that gap analysis is, I mean, Ms. Kelly even identified when they put those regulators on, it was a substantial decrease from those regulators. So part and parcel, Councilmember Leslie, when sitting down with our staff, 2 things. One, council needs to provide direction when we move through that section 18A, or if we can do that offline, that the HOAs will be provided a different level of accountability for X period of time, is essentially what the ask is. Your ask is what can be done now. It's what every household, whether you're exceeding or whether you're not, right? It's frequency and duration. 70% of our water can be managed by frequency and duration. When you're watering 3 times a day, that's an issue. When you're not watering at optimal times of day, that's an issue. In addition to equity, right? And so all of those questions, online and offline, from a good faith effort, is something that we'll have to decide outside of the water rate conversation tonight of passing. Thus the section 18A, or we can do it on the management piece. With regards to accelerating, it's not accelerating, it's not the work that we're doing right now, it's complex. And so it's not pulling out one item at a time in order to say, let's elevate those conversations to come back with the conservation piece. They are essentially one decision will impact the other, which will impact the other. So it's a 1.5-year journey in order to bring you what we want to bring you in September, which is recommendations and activations. During that period of time, we have to shore up our structure on the back end to ensure that when you pull the trigger, we're able to activate. All of that being said, I think maybe Judy Kelly should be giving all HOAs the Water Watch study on what they have done, what they have seen from their baseline. And we can certainly support that as we move forward. And then have those additional conversations. Nobody wants to be punitive. I mean, we're not coming with a hammer. That said, conservation doesn't lessen the amount of cost. Councilmember Marsh-Holston and I were talking in the back. If you have a pipe that costs $1 million, whether there's 2 inches of water running through it or 6 inches of water running through it, you still need that $1 million pipe. We're not making any money on these increases that you all are voting on tonight. It's not a money-making endeavor, right? So the amount that we've been absorbing rather than charging on the exceedances is absorbed by all of the other components in the water stream, right? It's a finite pot of money, water-wise and infrastructure-wise. So I would recommend that we have the additional conversations offline specific to the 2 HOAs, see where we are, what the recommendations are. Ken, do you have anything to add with regards to kind of what the cadence is on what happens next when we're talking about that, the full-blown comprehensive water and wastewater plan?
We appreciate the question and your comments. I really do. I think it is urgent for us to take a look at items, but it also is critically important for us to make sure we follow the process to make it right. And that process sometimes does take a little bit of time, and there is multiple departments involvement. So we'll take a look at it as a staff, see what we can do. But It is a process and we want to make it right.
And I'm a very process-oriented person myself, so I appreciate that point. All I would, I guess, ask on behalf of all of us, not just here on council, but for the whole, CCOB, as things emerge and those things that could in fact stand alone, that they be shared with us. Because not everything has to wait until a particular goal date. So as things come up that could be shared and utilized, certainly getting those out to the public would be beneficial for all of us. But I again, as I said, I really appreciate how much we learned last week that CCOB is doing on behalf of water and wastewater and reuse water, et cetera. Really appreciate hearing that you've got a process going now to enhance our ability to be more sustainable. And I think there's a solid cadre of residents that are really excited about this. For those of us, at least in the 2 HOAs, getting the data that we need, knowing what our goals have got to be, and having the ability to make that happen as quickly as possible is what we're all about. So obviously, we're already doing things at Anthem Ranch outside of anything that may come up here. And I really appreciate the acknowledgement of Judy's work and Chris's work. We have another committee that we're working with some residents that have more expertise than most of us in water. And so we're going to be as active as we can. But as said, we want to work closely with CCOB. We want to make sure we're doing this as part of a community-wide process. Because if there's no water in the reservoir, then that doesn't matter how many heads we have and how many tips we have and all that other kind of stuff. So we've got to be sustainable in all the work that we do. But it's got to come back to the individual homeowner as well. It's not just the HOA. So again, we're just looking for any help that we can get. So thank you. And thank you, City Manager Hoffman. And we will be meeting to pursue this on the side as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindstedt.
Thank you, Mayor. Could you talk a little bit about the water tap increase and why it could not be staggered over a longer period of time?
I'm going to have Brenda Ritchie and our consultant. This is probably the, I don't know, 7th iteration of how to do it in the most thoughtful, proactive way and still be able to pay the bills.
Right. Good evening, Council. So I think we might have discussed this before. The analogy that we often use in our firm is to think of this as a balloon. So the water utility is a balloon. So you've got one end of it is the license fees or the growth portion. The other side of the balloon, if you will, is the ratepayers or the user rates. So as City Manager mentioned, there's a finite amount of money within the water utility and any of your utilities that's needs to be drawn upon in order to pay the bills. So we certainly could squeeze the end of the license fees and lower those license fees down, but that just pushes the air in this example to the other side of the balloon, which means that rates would have to go up that much higher in order to compensate for the fact that we're not getting that revenue from the license fees. And part of what we were looking for was we wanted to ensure that growth was paying its proportionate share so that as new development comes in, they're paying the cost for the infrastructure, they're paying the cost of the capacity that they're using up, and we're not burdening the ratepayers who have already paid their development fees, who are already paying to maintain the system. So we wanted to maintain that equity and that balance there. And then the other thing, as Brenda mentioned earlier on, was the maximum that we could look at, the maximum we calculated was about $46,000. So as part of the iterative process that we went through with staff, we looked at how much lower can we go on the license fees and still be able to cover the growth related costs and make sure that we're not putting the growth capital projects in jeopardy and having to rely on the rates themselves in order to subsidize that. So that's how we got to that 35,000 recommendation on the license fee side, if that answers the question.
So I mean, it does,
Okay.
broadly, but my question was more specific to it's a 30% increase on water taps in 1 year. And, from a percentage change, it's a huge outlier compared to all the other percentage changes on the rate. So I guess my question is, why is the proposal 1 year instead of
Year as
3
opposed to
or
phasing in?
4, just whatever. I mean, it seems like a lot.
I understood. I misunderstood it initially. So that was part of the financial planning process and looking at when the capital expansions were going to be occurring, when we needed to acquire additional water rights, when we needed to expand the treatment plants, build new water mains, that kind of thing. So it was a timing aspect that we were looking at and making sure that we had the money up front in order to be able to fund those capital projects as they came online based on what we know today and what the costs are today. So that's why we did the jump right away, as opposed to if the projects were further out into the future, then yes, that certainly would have been an option that we could have explored further. But given the timing of the capital needs, that's why we made the jump right away that we did.
Because we have to make those improvements in the next few years.
Correct.
And then I guess my next question is, for folks on well water who will have to pay these tap fees eventually to get off of well water. And there are a handful of residences left in Broomfield that do not have city water, but are on well water. Are they going to get a notification of this increase to those tap fees somehow?
Ms. Ritchie?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Lindstedt. We're going to be working with our, after the passage of the ordinance, the intent is to start working both on our community side as well as development side. So I know that planning has already taken efforts and made steps that they've already been doing throughout the year. As we've had those study sessions, working with communications to put that outreach out there, notifying residents. And that's part of the process improvement related to our bills, where we have the ability to put those types of notifications of the those changes that are forthcoming. So we will have those sections there, and then identify those on well water that we can reach out and do a special campaign for. So that is part of the communications plan.
So the increase takes effect on January 1st, and it's going to be a $10,000 increase on anybody trying to make that conversion. I guess I would like to mention that that's important to a lot of folks, and maybe Wilcox and Original Broomfield and Sunnyside. And I mean, there's places where wells are. So I've been hesitant about this increase. I plan on supporting it tonight, but this just because the need is there. But this is not a $10,000 increase in 1 year is really substantial for new development and for existing residents who need to hook up to city services. So I think we need to reevaluate this, but I know the time crunch is there and the capital needs are there. So it's really hard for me, but I appreciate it.
Councilmember Lindstedt, that's exactly why when recommendations are made that we follow. Because now we are in a grind of having to make up for 8 to 12 years of inaction on both the OM side and the capital improvement side. So again, you can't continue to have development, yes, and then no to the really tough stuff. So you're absolutely right. And case in point of why that smoothing effect is so important. So we don't have to have these jumps.
Thank you. Are you done? Okay. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I just want to start with a appreciation for our staff and all of their help on we started off with this initial concern over the HOAs and the rate category and the confirmation that yes, they are non-residential and that is all resolved. So that was very helpful. Then I just want to second Councilmember Lindstedt and others, this communication piece is really, really critical, especially as I'm looking at this tier structure and I hadn't thought about from those on the well water to wanting to move quickly if they were going to do it in the near term, but also the misinformation that can come out looking at that top tier that goes up like 30% to just show that the average customer is really not going to see an increase when you look at it all together. That's a critical piece of information to get out there. Most of my questions, which we can take this offline, I appreciate that. I'm just going to throw out the two pieces in case there is anything else to be added tonight, or else we need a very near term, some answers for our HOAs. I've received calls from both Anthem Ranch and Anthem Highlands, several calls. Their urgency here, as I understand it, is that they do need to communicate these increases to the residents if we can't resolve a couple of these matters very quickly. And then one that I think is the main piece of information, my understanding is that both of the HOAs need is that discussion, having some accounts way over and some accounts way under, you know, that, and we don't need to have that answer tonight, but that is the piece that's so urgent, is to find out, can they combine those accounts? Because that makes a huge difference. Like whether it's a one-time transfer of tap equivalents to the ones that are actually being used, or, I mean, ideally it would just be that you have one entity, one HOA that's holding 20 different accounts. And can it just be a sum total of all those accounts? That piece is going to be, I believe, very critical to these conversations.
So Councilmember Anderson, I can say that apparently the city manager has the option of being able to transfer those. Which I say tongue in cheek and then not tongue in cheek because who knew? Ensuring that it doesn't take from any other pool, right? And so again, having it be done administratively is as long as it's not a zero-sum game, right? As long as there's not an impact, because that is not something that I would do administratively. But I can, yeah. So for the HOAs in the room and for you and Councilmember Leslie, yes, the transferring of those water tap fees, or I'm sorry, the water tap equivalents to balance is something that we can do.
Okay.
And my guess is it's going to be a significant impact.
For the HOAs to balance out their accounts.
Yes.
Yes, it will be significant. I can assure you that. Okay, so that's helpful, and we can, the exact, how that actually works out and whether there's an option to transfer on an annual, like a one-time transfer, if there's a way to just, you know, look at it if they need to do it again in the future. Or I still think if you just total up to 20 accounts and they're not going over, all said and done in the end, that would be the best way for the HOAs. Okay, so that's helpful, and we can get more information on that if for any other questions HOAs have. But also, there have been some questions about the current reuse supply and whether we're actually, like how, and this is going to play into the Section 18 request, like, are we depleting our current reuse supply such that this is like urgent in this moment, or is this in 5 years, 10 years, as we move towards build out, when there is no margin left? Like, are we at this point on an annual basis depleting our reuse supply? And this might be a question for Ken Rutt on exactly how that just a quick overview on how that reuse supply works, because I think I'm still confused on that one. Like, what exactly is that reuse based on?
Thank you, Councilman Anderson. It's a good question. Unless you're in the field, maybe you don't realize, and maybe we didn't communicate very effectively on it. But currently, the answer is no, we're not in danger of overusing everything based on today. The drought condition obviously could affect that because we don't have control over that. Northern Water would make that call. And so that could make an adjustment, and we won't know that until April. So does that answer your question, that currently we have the supplies to meet our current demands?
Yes, that is helpful. So, okay, so it's not just build out, but also Northern Water's quotas can also impact that.
Yes, because Northern Water manages our water supplies and the reservoirs, and they make the quota determinations.
Okay, that is helpful. And we can, well, I think we'll have more questions as the conversation with the HOAs goes further, but that does answer my questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So just wanted to clarify a couple things. So the tiered water rates are being introduced mainly to introduce the tiered system. So this is something that we haven't had before. It was basically the same rate for every user, and we are going to move into a tiered system. And this is, going to better cover the costs of that water enterprise. As our city and county manager stated, we aren't going to be making any money on these increases. But this plan is not to push conservation. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Schaaf. That is correct. It is just the tool and the first step. We have the ability, again, on an annual basis, as the demographics change, as that water demand supply and those costs, we will have the ability to see where those numbers come in and if they drive to help as a factor in the conservation efforts, they will, but they are not the driver.
Great, thanks. So when we're talking about cost recovery for the water enterprise, that answers my question concerning water rates, but on the license fees, are we doing the same kind of thing where we need to recover the costs that will be extended? And the place to do that is through those license fees. So we're not raising the license fees to make money. We are going to cover the costs that will be made, and that those improvements are going to happen very soon.
That is correct. And also just as a reminder, because we don't have any other revenue coming in, such as sales tax, property tax, no other revenue can support these systems, which is why it has to be self-sufficient. So you're correct, Councilmember Schaaf.
Thanks. And then one more question on the license fees. So there was some concern that our Brimfield developers haven't been communicated to surrounding the license fees. Is that correct, that we haven't had communication? I understood that with our study session that we had communicated to our developers.
That is correct. We've made some initial communication, but without having a finalized ordinance in place. The plan was there's actually already a communications, plan in place with building to reach out with those developers. We've had developers reach out, and we've been either initially having those discussions with redevelopment, or they'll be reaching out to the project managers directly. And they've been having those conversations of what those impacts are and what their options are in terms of helping to assist in those efforts if the rates were to move that way. So we've been having those conversations since we introduced it during the July study session. So from that time forward, we've been engaging with folks, but a formalized communication plan is forthcoming.
Okay, great. And then you had talked about the time period at which council will review the water rates and the water license fees. Is it going to be on an annual review basis?
That is correct. So what we've done is been able to tie it in with the budget process, and we're looking to improve actually the coordination and communication related to the annual budget process. So implementing that, it'll allow staff the necessary time and data to be collected to be able to do that thorough review, provide that due diligence, and then come to council during the study session, provide that recommendation, have that discussion, so that by the time the budget is adopted, we could be doing that concurrently, rather than, if you recall, previous practice was to wait until December, even into the next year, have a separate discussion. But because it really ties to our budget and our planning in terms of anticipated costs and revenues, the thought was to tie that in together. So we will continue on an annual basis. We've also updated our model through this process. There's a completely new model that we are looking at in terms of doing that due diligence. So we'll be working with our consultants through the end of March to make sure staff is fully aware of how the model works, and so that we can be able to provide council with that information going forward.
Okay, and just one more question, just because it came to mind. With the conservation programs that we currently have in place, are those funded by the water enterprise program, or are those funded out of general operating expenses?
That's a great question, Councilmember Schaaf. Those are funded from the enterprise system. And so we have looked at recognizing the need. I believe there were 86 requests this year, and we were only able to fund a third of them based on last week's study session discussion. So we are looking at what opportunities we have with expanding that program without impacting, to Mr. Burnett's earlier point, of that balloon shift. And so there is opportunity, we believe, there in some capacity that is built in to be able to address that going forward.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mayor. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a couple of small points. I wanted first to echo, I think, Councilmember Lindsted's concern about a 30% increase, any kind of increase in that size. So suddenly does suggest in some ways some failure in planning, but I just wanted to say, I do think the council, not this council, but councils in general, own that, because I believe the council has only followed recommendations once in 10 years. So that's where we're at. However, I am interested in somewhat of an inconsistency that in water rates, we're going up 30% immediately. In the housing ordinance that's coming later, there's a 3-year ramp up. And so we're giving developers on the housing in lieu fee 3 years, but for the water tap, we're just going immediately. And I understand the explanation of paying the bills, but that seems inconsistent. And I assume there's a reason, but, but it just stands out to me. The other question I just wanted to, point of interest in terms of, I think the point was raised very well in terms of the open spaces people may stop watering them as a result of extra fees, and obviously might create the inadvertent concern of creating more fuel for wildfires. Have we considered any way to mitigate that or change the rates or give some incentives for people to continue to keep those kinds of areas watered and not dried out?
All good questions. Thank you, Councilmember Cohen. So the consistency, you're funding two different infrastructures. So one infrastructure is we'd like to have affordable housing. It's important to have affordable housing. But with our water infrastructure, we are about 8 years behind. So again, to your point of this is what happens when you wait and when there isn't an application, it's the hurry up and rush. And so we can't be the fastest growing county. Demographer came out today. Broomfield's going to increase 20,000 by 2030. So we're going to be right at our tipping point where we originally thought we were going to be a build out. And so again, one is the cadence, the application methodology is different for those two because one is you're starting fresh and building a component. And this one, we should have been doing this for 7 years. And so all of the decisions that councils have made in the past and the increasing, two things set Broomfield apart. One is the second thing that we'll address. All of our surrounding communities, they all have very similar accoutrements to us. But what sets us apart is we have shored up our water. Now we just have, now we have to make sure that we can get the water from where we've shored it up to where it needs to be. So that infrastructure piece and our 40% of open space. Those two items will separate Broomfield now and for the next 100 years. When you have 40% of your 34 square miles dedicated to open space, trails, parks, more trails than paved streets, the infrastructure that comes around that, you would think that the infrastructure be less. It isn't. So when we're looking at having to expand the wastewater treatment facility statutorily, it leaves you all in a real, I mean, it's not even really a quandary, right? I mean, it's an unhappy place. It's an uncomfortable place, but it's not one that we can say, well, if we don't increase the IHO fee, it's kind of a take it or leave it. But if we don't do this, the flushing of the toilets and turning on the faucets, that's where that conversation leads. So that's, it's not even fruit, right? That it's not apples and oranges. It's a completely different basket. The point with regards to the grass fires and not having the watering, we're going to continue. Director Shuck and I have had conversations as we're moving through the goals for 2023 on the emergency management conversations, and one with regards to that mitigation piece. Those continue to be the finite pot of water, right? So whatever council directs staff, if the decision is made that we're going to take a portion of that finite water to continue to irrigate the open spaces to mitigate the fire, we can certainly do that. But again, those funds are going to come from somewhere. The water's going to come out of that pot from somewhere. So we can certainly continue to explore that. But again, there's no silver bullet. There's no, there isn't any salve that's going to be able to be put on this water issue. It's expensive. We have to have it.
I would just say, I think we need to give some consideration so we don't have a Marshall fire and we'll wish we had watered. So I think it may be worth the expense in some point to figure that out and make a decision. So I think it's something worth debating. I think real quickly, just the counter argument to the housing, and the mayor's going to wrap my knuckles for going on a different topic, but we went 10 years without doing what we should have. And by delaying the housing, that's a third of the next 10 years when the 20,000 people are coming. So are we giving up funds that we really will need for affordable housing in that same period? So just something to consider from my point of view. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
Yes, thank you. Public Works Director Rutt referred to the new rule from the Colorado Water Quality Control Commission that allows for direct potable reuse. And I had read about that and was interested in that. One point that connected when I read about it was that it's going to need extensive public communication on that issue to assure people that it's safe for drinking. And I just wanted to mention here that as ACES has discussed its interest in various topics, that there's a strong interest in ACES in discussing water usage and conservation. And there is actually someone who's the vice chair of ACES, who's a water engineer, and has been on ACES, I think since its inception. So I just wanted to mention that in that context. And then also with this possibility of direct potable reuse, they mentioned that there would be like at least a year lead time necessary to collect wastewater samples. So if this ends up looking like a tangible possibility, do we have any idea how far out in the future that this might be possible in Broomfield?
Councilmember Lim, we just talked about that about 4 hours ago. Director Rutt.
Thank you for your question, Councilmember Lim. Yes, the process is fairly long. We do have to go through a pilot study. We have to go through some sampling analysis, and then there's the engineering components. Where do we site the treatment facility? Where do we discharge to? How do we blend the water with current water supply? So there's a significant engineering effort. So we're probably looking at, we got a year worth of the master plan study, and then you're probably looking at another a year of pilot study and a couple of years of engineering, and then construction of 2 to 3 years. So we're looking probably 6 to 7 years down the road.
Okay, then I guess a follow-up question is, since this is allowable in any part of Colorado now by this rule, do you know of any communities who anticipated that this would be, that Colorado would be allowing this new rule and are going to be able to move forward to it more quickly?
And we were part of the stakeholder group throughout the process with the state, along with Aurora, Colorado Springs, Castle Rock, and a few other entities. Aurora currently is doing the pilot study. They're the ones that have some of the tighter water supply issues, along with Castle Rock and Colorado Springs. So they are starting the pilot studies now, and that's the process they're in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other first round questions from council? Well, before I go to second round, I had a couple of little questions. So on the third tier, the highest rate tier of over 20,000 gallons, what percentage of our population, our residential customers, fall into that category?
As you can tell, I'm trying to pull up that number. Thank you for the question, Mayor. We do have that information. Bear with me one second. But I believe it's roughly 20%. I don't want to miss. Oh. First, technology doesn't work when you want it to.
That's okay. It's my fault for not submitting.
No,
it in
you're fine.
advance.
I can, as you maybe ask your next question, I can continue.
Well, there's a story behind it because I got a call from one of our third tier customers in Wilcox, and many of those residents own multi-acre properties. You know, it's just the way it is. They have 2 acres, 5 acres, 10 acres. And so they're already using over 20,000 in the extreme days. But what can we offer them? What can they do about just having a large parcel of land? I mean, just not have any water on anything. I mean, I feel like they're going to really be hit hardest, whether it's 10% or 20%, those residents. You know, I want to be able to offer them a solution, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, how can they deal with us? They're already conserving internally, but with that big parcel of land, what can they do?
So I think that's part of the conversation that all of us, whether you are in a rural area, a semi-rural area, or a suburban area, what our topography looks like right now is going to look very different in 5 years. It just is. And so there are no simple solutions. We're going to continue to be drier and drier and drier and air. I mean, again, so we've seen it over the last decade, but we've seen it, but we haven't felt it. We're feeling it now. And so those pressures, again, it's a change of habit. It's a change of what we see. It's a change substantially of who we are. So we'd love to be able to offer a multitude of solutions. But the bottom line is there aren't any with regards to what those lessening those impacts. So we can shift from the ever increasing high cost of the infrastructure, which again, the conversations that staff had today was really an aha moment, which is the infrastructure costs don't go down because the conservation goes up. It's counterintuitive. You think if the conservation is going up and the water usage less, that your infrastructure itself is going to be less, and that is simply not the case. So again, it gets back to Councilmember Lim's question of super exciting, fascinating, being able to use gray water to drink. But the backbone of that is very similar to all these other questions. It requires additional infrastructure to hold, to treat, to pour, to lean before it even comes out of your faucet. So again, Mayor, it's again, these are really difficult conversations, and one that it behooves communities to really, we're going to swallow hard on a lot of this stuff.
I appreciate the answer, the honesty. Ms.
Well,
Ritchie.
to answer your question of what percentage are those customers above the 20,000 gallon mark that last year, it's 11% of our customers, our total customers.
Thank you. And then my other question is about the license fee. So it's going up about 10,000. Is that for a single family home as opposed to a multifamily development, where would that be each unit in the multifamily would have to pay that, or I just don't know the difference?
It's a great question, and thank you for the opportunity to clarify, Mayor. It is actually based on the TAP equivalent. So that will be different for the type of unit it is. So a resident, a single family home would have a different definition of what that TAP equivalent needs are versus like a multifamily is 0.4 of a TE versus a full TE. So there's differentiations that our building department has calculations on and assign those TAP equivalents based on that. So it's not necessarily a single family home has the same as the multifamily unit because a unit is 0.4 of a TE.
Okay,
So
thank you. That helps. That's all I have. I'll go to our second round questions. Councilmember Lindstedt.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not usually one to do a second round of questions, but my esteemed colleagues have got my brain working a little bit, and I just had a couple additional questions. For projects in the pipeline, developments in the pipeline that might be impacted by this increase in tap fees, what does that mean for them? Just
My, where is Anna, Jeff?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. Mr. Romine
Yes, please, Mr. Romine.
and Anna as well. Oh, there she is. Thank you, Ms. Burtonzetti.
Oh, Ms. Burtonzetti, welcome.
Mr. Romine, you're off the hook.
But I wanted to hear him say Mayor, Council, Mayor Pro Tem. You robbed me. Anna will do it.
Thank you. Good evening again, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. So yes, we have been in communication with all of our development partners who are in the pipeline. I believe Ms. Ritchie kind of went over. We've sent out group emails. We've talked in pre-applications. If a developer is very close to permits, if they purchase their water license fees or sewer and reuse as well before the end of the year, then this would not impact them. And so we have talked with some development groups that are interested in doing that, including projects like Flatiron Crossing, because it is a significant savings.
one I was thinking about.
Yep, exactly. But if they are not close to pulling permits and they pull permits after the first of the year, this will impact projects that are within the pipeline.
So how does that work? I don't know when you're allowed to pay a water tap fee. Do you have to have a project approved? Can you, if you just owned land, could you just preemptively buy them? Do they expire? I was just out of curiosity.
They don't really expire. As a matter of practice, we work with the developers. They need to be pretty close so that we can accurately estimate what they need in terms of the TEs, because it is a non-refundable purchase. So if they purchase too many, there is no process for us to adjust that after the fact. So we really look to have projects similar to Flatiron Crossing that are, we're pretty knowledgeable about how many units they'll have, what the density will be. We can do a close estimation. Or if they're very close to permits and we know what their building plans are, we can do a very accurate assessment.
So if back to the non-development side, so if a resident in Sunnyside didn't want to do a water tap to their house, but they wanted to buy the fee early, would they be allowed to do that before the increases come up?
I think subject to the approval of the city manager, we could probably work with something like that.
Okay, and then just my last question, just to get it on record, because we've been kind of dancing around it. What happens if we don't make the enterprise fund balanced and we vote this down and we fail to meet our 2030 statutory requirement on these wastewater improvements?
Our mighty consultant, I'm sure, has had communities that for whatever reason, whether they chose it, whether they chose not to do it, what would happen?
Yeah, so you've got a couple of different things that can happen. Being as we're in Colorado and we have the Tabor rules. So if you were to take money in from the general fund or some other source, then you would lose your Tabor status. It would no longer be an enterprise fund, which would have a whole slew of issues associated with that. Another impact would be, as city manager and council has been discussing already tonight, you just kick the can further down the road and you delay projects, you don't reinvest into your infrastructure. The plant that you're anticipating to be expanded can't be expanded, growth stops, you can't sell any more taps. In a worst case scenario, the EPA would step in and say, you don't have a choice anymore. You have to do this now because you're in violation of environmental standards because you have not maintained your system. We worked with a client a little earlier on that they were in that position and they had 120% rate increase that the council had to swallow because they had deferred for so long that the EPA stepped in and said, you're not kicking the can any further. So does that answer it?
That does. And
Okay.
Yeah, I would, you know, as a member of this council, I do not want to see this body kick that can down the road to future councils. Has been done as a practice previously. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall Olson.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. On Councilmember Lindsay's questions that he's raised earlier, how many residents do we have that are existing on wells that aren't hooked up to the water? Not new developments, but existing residents. Do we have a number
I'm scanning the area for anyone to come and save.
or estimate, I guess?
Anna, any idea? Sorry to make you walk all the way back down there, Anna. Appreciate it. Yeah, there you go. Think and walk.
Thank you again, Mayor. I really don't have a great estimate. I think you're right. Probably the majority of them are located in Sunny Slope or Wilcox, but there are quite a number of residents in there that were on Mile High water before being annexed, and so they're on our water now. I think it would still be a pretty small percentage of those residents that are still on well water. And then if I could just add on to my prior comment about purchasing early, as I was sitting down, I realized one of the things to be aware of for those residents, if they were to purchase a water license early, is that we do charge the water. There are fees associated then that would they become responsible for, even if they haven't physically tapped into the water line, but they would be responsible for that.
So, thank you. So the question I have, I guess, is, has there been any, not suggesting we should do this tonight, but is there been any discussions of charging those legacy customers, those ones that are existing owners that are on wells, a lower tap fee to hook up to the city water, or waiving it, or some other system? And what impact would that have on the budget and all that?
I can answer the first part of that question. I looked back at our annexation agreement, or the draft that we had with the Wilcox residents at the time. And it's the way that it was written, the water licenses would be due and based on what the city is charging at the time. I don't know with whether that conversation has been had over the last however many years, but that was the initial discussion, was that it would be charged based on when the water license is pulled.
So waiving it, I would say no, because somebody has to pay for that, and we don't want it coming out of the enterprise fund. But certainly worth additional conversation about locking into the 2022 amount. And I say that with inflections of I have absolutely no idea what I'm saying right now at this moment.
Okay.
So
was just
certainly
curious
from
that-
council direction.
Okay. That's all I had, man. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Nobody? Okay. Well, the public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of the proposed ordinances. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance numbers 2176, 2177, and 2203 by title? It is acceptable for council to make a combined motion and vote on all three ordinances as a group. Is there you have to read it though, sorry.
11B, public hearing ordinance number 2176, repealing and reenacting sections 13-12-010 and 13-12-010 of the Broomfield Municipal Code to change monthly water service charges and water license fees. Ordinance number 2177, repealing and reenacting sections 13-12-020 and 13-08-020 of the Broomfield Municipal Code to change the monthly sewer service charges and sewer license fee. Ordinance number 2203, repealing and reenacting sections 13-32-060 and 13-32-070 of the Broomfield Municipal Code to change the connection fee and flat monthly and consumption charges for reclaimed wastewater service. Second and final reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt all three ordinances? Councilmember Schaaf.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Marsh Holston.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So, given that these tiered water rates are more of an introduction and not a, kind of a way to push conservation, I think it is important that as we analyze these in the next year, it would be interesting to find out, are our top two tiers conserving water on their own, given the tiered water rates, because they will be paying more than your lowest tier. So it would be interesting to analyze that data to see, are they moving on their own, given that this isn't a push for conservation, it's a push to cover the costs, which, as I mentioned in our study session before, the lowest tiers have always been subsidizing the top tier water users, and now they're actually going to pay for their additional water infrastructure that is needed, given that they are a large water user. So, it would be great to have that data for that analysis as we look to review this on an annual basis. But I also would like to see if there's a possibility with that, that if given those conservation efforts aren't being made, that we look to find ways to subsidize those conservation programs that are going to be paid for by those top two tier rate users, so that so the additional funds that they are going to be spending are then going to be covering those conservation programs that they and then will be able to take advantage of, and those all would be paid within the enterprise, and then those funds would be paid out of for those conservation programs would be paid out of the enterprise fund as well. And that's all I have. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Great comments. Anyone else? All righty then. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinances number 2176, 2177, and 2203. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Limb,
Yes.
Lindsted,
Yes.
Marsh Holston,
Yes.
Schaaf,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jazirski, Leslie,
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. It is 8:08 and we're going to take a 10-minute recess and we will be back at 8:18. Thank you all very much. Welcome back. The next item under council business this evening is a public hearing and council's consideration on second and final reading of proposed ordinance number 2187, repealing and enacting chapter 17 through 76 of the Broomfield Municipal Code regarding inclusionary housing. I'll now declare the public hearing open and will follow the city's standard public hearing procedures as previously outlined. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. And Rachel King joins us this evening. She's the Deputy Director of Economic Vitality. She's going to give us a brief overview as it is second reading. Ms. King.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. Tonight, we're providing, as Ms. Hoffman said, a very brief overview of the goals and a few of the key recommendations for the updated inclusionary housing ordinance proposed for your consideration. Next slide, please. So simply, the proposed ordinance language encourages developers to provide affordable units. They're doing this by updating the unit requirements to meet stakeholder needs and market conditions, increasing the cash in lieu fees to allow Broomfield to support unit development when the creation of units on site is not feasible, and by providing a timely phased transition from past fee requirements to the updated levels. Next slide, please. The first key recommendation is to expand the types of housing and AMI eligibility for on-site restricted housing units. This prioritizes the creation of on-site units by improving ability for developers to provide them per the feedback that we've received from the development community. It gives more opportunity to more residents by targeting a broader middle income, and promotes homeownership and household wealth building through homeownership. And it also acknowledges new and increasing product types in the market, such as the for rent single family home. In rental products, AMIs are increased here up to 80% AMI, and in for sale products up to 100% AMI. Next slide, please. The second key recommendation is to increase the inclusionary housing fees for rental and for sale products by setting the fee based on current market data, using an affordability gap method to determine the difference in price between market rate and affordable units. Fees for rental units are proposed at the end of a 3-year period, $106,635 per unit, and for sale units, $165,669 per unit. Next slide, please. And finally, the third key recommendation is to phase the implementation of the increased fee over a 3-year period with equal steps for the first 2 years. And the third year will include an adjustment to match the market change over the 3-year period using a CPIU index. Next slide. So while there are several other minor changes that are proposed in the ordinance, these summarize the key updates. Therefore, this concludes staff presentation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. King. We'll now proceed with in-person public comment. If there's anyone who'd like to be heard, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. Seeing none. I don't see any online either. I don't think we've had a single public comment online. But anyway, questions from council are next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion, and the time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. Are there any questions? Second reading. Who do we have? Where's Jean? Is Councilmember Lim up? Just wanted to see her. Okay, she's still there. Hi. Just checking. So any questions from council? Okay, cool. The public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2187. Will the clerk please read proposed ordinance number 2187 by title?
11C, public hearing ordinance number 2187, repealing and reenacting chapter 17 through 76, inclusionary housing of the Broomfield Municipal Code, second and final reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Henkel?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? There's some new things here. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2187. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Lindsted,
Yes.
Marsh Holshin,
Yes.
Chaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes, yes, yes.
Jezersky, Leslie,
Yes.
Limb.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. All right, team. Thank you very much, Ms. King and Ms. Tessier. And I'm sure Jeff Romine and everybody else back there, Ms. Burton Zeddy, that helped with everything. The final item under council business this evening is a public hearing and council's consideration on second and final reading of proposed ordinance number 2202, amending the Broomfield Municipal Code to establish a resident member county board of health. I'll now declare the public hearing open. We'll follow the city standard public hearing procedures as previously outlined. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
As staff is moving in one direction, Director Balling,
I don't see him.
Jason, I have not seen him either, come to think of it.
Oh, me neither.
Miss Gilbert, pinch
Oh.
hitting. Come on down. Should be down in Dirty Pat's second reading.
Nothing to test my extemporaneous skills by
Yes.
just being
Keep 'em
called on the
fresh.
spot, having done a flight of stairs as well. Thank you.
Very nice.
We'll be done by then.
So thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Super pleased to be here to present this tonight. This is the proposed ordinance number 2202, and this is to amend, boy, I'm still like out of breath from the stairs. To amend our Broomfield code to change the composition of our Board of Health from Council's Board of Health, which it is currently now, to the citizen appointed Board of Health. So pause, take a breath.
It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it has been a long time
Right.
coming. So this changes this proposed ordinance is reflective of what we do for other boards and commissions. It uses the same language related to choosing community members. The exception here, of course, is that it's related to people who have expertise in public health, which was the history that brought us here during COVID, where this board did an amazing job, but perhaps did not have the depth of experience in public health matters. So this ordinance creates that as a citizen appointed by this board panel of, or commission of 5, and the qualifications are set forth in the ordinance. You can take a look at those. The one thing that this ordinance also does mechanically is it keeps you as the Board of Health until such time you have appointed those 5 community members and that board is up and running. And that'll transfer the power of the Board of Health from council to the citizen Board of Health. So the rest is in the memo. Hopefully that does an okay job for you guys.
Nice job. Similar to the Housing Authority, right?
Similar to the Housing
Yeah.
Authority, yes.
Correct, and the recruitment, the package has already been developed, so it will go out at the same time of all of our boards and commissions. That ends staff's presentation, Mayor.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Next is public comment. So we'll start with in-person public comment. If there's anyone who'd like to be heard, please come to the podium. State your name and neighborhood, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Roxy Jewel Lackamore. I'm glad this is happening because I think professionals should be taking care of our Board of Health instead of individuals. Individuals have a habit of doing things by heart and not by intelligence. And that got us into a lot of trouble during COVID. There was too much fighting. There was too many things that had to be done that in my opinion, didn't need to be done, but yet we did them anyway. So it never affected me. So especially in the summertime, I was still out gardening because I was all by myself. But it can't always be that way with everybody. So I think the professionals should really be making the decisions instead of individuals, because it just doesn't work when you have a medical problem. I have a lot of aunts that are in the profession, and I have a niece is too. She's just below a doctor. So I don't know what that is with preemie children. So she takes care of over 100 preemies in a month. So if she had somebody or just a mom come in and say how the rules had to be, how would that work? That would not work, because their heart is into it and not their brain, because they don't have it at that time. So professionals need to be in this position, and I'm glad this is finally happening. Too bad it couldn't happen sooner than now. But anyway, good for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? I don't see anyone online. Questions from council is next. Members should limit themselves to questions, and amendments is later. Any questions from council? Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is more on kind of the administration side of the Public Health Board and the operations of it as well. Who are the staff liaisons going to be, and how is this going to be structured in terms of the staff support for this board?
It'll continue to be public health, just as they were staffing you all.
Okay. And then is there kind of a back end operation to this independent board, similar to kind of the back end of the housing board, or is this much more internal?
Help me understand that question a little bit more.
Well,
please.
like with the housing board, we have an executive director. We have the finance mechanism, and we're going to be moving that on more and more onto the independent housing board's responsibility, where some of that right now is internal. With the public health board, will this become more of an independent body that a lot of those administration pieces will be on the board itself, or is this much more internal?
So it'll be a combination of the two. So from a support perspective, it will continue, as I said, from a public health perspective, but the board will nominate a chair and vice chair as far as direction goes. And then the feedback will be directly to council from the board.
Okay, and then I know that with some communities, there's an executive director of their public health board. Will we act as that, or will our director of public health, Mr. Valling, continue to serve in that, I guess, advisory role to that public health board?
Correct.
Okay, cool.
Director Valling's here now. Hi. Did you want to say anything?
Questions, I'm happy.
Well, we'll see. Any other questions, Councilman?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. Well, you're off the hook. Then the public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2202. Will the clerk please read proposed ordinance number 2202 by title?
D, public hearing ordinance number 2202, amending Broomfield Municipal Code, section 2-04-030 and adding chapter 2-45 to establish a resident member county board of health, second and final reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion, Councilmember Lindstad?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Schaaf?
Thank you, Mayor. So as our public comment tonight, I would agree, this is much needed, and it's about time that we do it. I remember early conversations with the mayor just after we got elected about the rationale for the council serving as the public health board. And that was something that we discussed at that point, that we probably should transition that. And then a pandemic happened, and we did not have time to stand up an independent board. So I'm glad that we're finally doing this. It is much needed, and it's great to have that experience serving our community. So I look forward to seeing how this process all unfolds. Thank you, staff.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I'm elated and I'm so grateful to you guys for making this happen and getting it done so quickly. The goal for in my personal, in my mistake, try to get it done before the end of the year. And as Director Ryan said in our public health, Board of Health meeting, that winter will tell us if we have reached endemic stage of COVID, and we don't know, right? But knowing that we're future proofing the city and county of Broomfield, if there is another situation like that, just gives me so much comfort. And it's just a great time. I'm very excited. So thank you. All right, then. All that amendment stuff. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2202. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Marshallson,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jazersky,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Linstead.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Yay, Broomfield. Sorry, that was personal. Okay. Thank you, guys. The city and county attorney's report is next. Ms. Rogers, do you have a report?
No, Mayor, thank you.
The city and county manager's report is next. Ms. Hoffman, do you have a report?
I don't have a report, but I want to take just a moment. Everything we do is so anticlimactic, right? We work
know.
on stuff for forever and ever and ever. And then we bring it and then we vote on it and then we all, kind of go home. It's a monumental night tonight.
It is.
And it's one that's been in a decade in the making. And so from a staff perspective, I can tell you that, and it sounds super cheesy, being brave and courageous, but it's no joke. And what you all were able to do and really push staff to understand what it was that we were bringing. And it either pushes us in another direction or it solidifies kind of the standing that we're on right now. And so to make those three really monumental decisions about what this future looks like from an infrastructure perspective and a housing perspective, it's really significant. And you didn't kick the can. And we are grateful to serve all of you.
Thank you. It's mutual. Well, there is no legislative update this evening, and items 15A and 16A were reviewed earlier. The third quarter expense report for elected officials was provided on this evening's agenda under special reports. There are no requests for future action this evening, and concluding the items on the agenda. Is there any other business to come before the council? Please note that the City and County of Broomfield Building Corporation will hold their annual public meeting directly following this meeting. There being no further business, the council meeting is adjourned.